Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of Red Raptor Writes. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the wombo combo of Blade, X-Men, and the box office smashing Spider-Man created a giant wave of superhero movies that has only slowed down after Endgame. After this initial success, we got the Spider-Man trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, more X-Men's, The Incredibles, and perhaps one of the most overlooked gems of our time, Sky High. Sky High was released in 2005 to generally favorable reviews and doubled its modest budget of $35 million at the box office, making it a cult classic. When you're a family-friendly Disney movie not tied to any existing property, being released right after the likes of Spider-Man 2 and Batman Begins, you tend to get overlooked. And that's a shame because although it may not seem like it at first glance, I mean, come on, a school for super kids, Sky High is actually an awesome movie with very clever writing, interesting ideas to explore, funny humor, and well-crafted characters. I'm really surprised that more people don't talk about this masterpiece, so here I am doing everyone else's job.
You had one job. Just the one.
If you haven't seen it before, major spoiler warning. Don't ruin it for yourself. Watch this movie. Okay guys, let's see why Sky High is so awesome. What makes it the most underappreciated movie of our generation? Let's dig this up. Before I dive headfirst into this cult classic, first I have to lay some groundwork. Then from that base, build the wonderful skyscraper that is Sky High. Yeah, kind of a silly metaphor, but I'm from New York, give me a break. If you have seen the movie, then this portion will be a nice refresher. If you haven't seen it, and for some reason you're still watching, sit quietly and take notes, but don't think I'm not mad at you for not watching it first. The main character here is Will Stronghold, the son of the world-famous couple, the Stronghold 2. At the beginning of the movie, Will and his best friend Layla start their freshman year at Sky High, a school for kids with superpowers. Layla controls plants, which is a nice nod, but Will doesn't have any powers, although, not wanting to disappoint his parents, pretends that he does. When arriving at Sky High, the two realize that instead of being a superhuman paradise, the school enforces a rigid class system that divides the students as either heroes or, well, man, I love Bruce Campbell. He's so good in this. Obviously, being a powerless loser, Will gets dumped with the sidekicks or hero support, as they're known on paper. Oh, and he meets this senior chick who's totally flirting with him and making Layla mad peanut butter and jelly. This chick's name is, wait for it, Gwen Grayson. Get it? Gwen Stacy, Dick Grayson, Gwen Grayson. Get it?
My name's Richard Grayson, but all the kids at the orphanage call me Dick.
Well, children can be cruel.
Yeah.
Just when you thought this was going to be one of those cliche, liar revealed stories where Will hides his averageness from the commander and Jetstream, nah, the writers just subvert your expectations without enraging millions of moviegoers. Will gets his powers mid-fight with War and Peace, a kid who if he said, go to the bathroom, you booked the Shrek out. Guys, War and Peace. War and Peace. His mom was a hero, his dad was a villain turned hero. War and Peace. Come on! How did these writers not win an Oscar? Anyways, Will acquires super strength, gets moved to hero classes, and leaves his friends behind to spend some time with Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I personally would have taken Danielle Panabaker, but that's just me. Before this turns into one of those sappy high school dramas, the climax kicks in as Gwen gets revealed to be the villain Royal Pain, who does what War and Peace would have done if he didn't make our hero's acquaintance. Wow, what a dark video for such a fun movie. Oh well. Will, Layla, Warren, and some other sidekicks team up to defeat Royal Pain and save the world. Well, that's the super abridged version, but you get the point. Something very helpful is how Sky High never commits to one story template in which to paint by the numbers like a lot of comic book films have in recent years. Yes, you can recognize different story elements from comic movies, Disney movies, and high school dramas, but they keep getting subverted or concluded before the story becomes too predictable. This way, it's able to be satirical and commentative while maintaining its own identity. On the surface, Sky High is one of those back-to-school stories. You know, the main cast arrives at a new school and struggles with classes, bullies, and popularity. That teenage Disney stuff you can see in countless sitcoms. And this is yet another superhero movie. Superheroes, schools, and schools for superheroes were nothing new in 2005, but Disney was able to repackage it, making it feel fresh while paying homage to what came before. Much of that is because the film never regurgitates old material. It knows that it can't get by on references and the audience's goodwill alone, a lesson Disney has long since forgotten. Nothing is taken at face value. Instead, everything is repackaged and recontextualized to get across a message about the American education system, how it's unfair and inhibits the potential of students in order to push them out like Model Ts. Earlier, I called Sky High a skyscraper. Now I'm calling it a batch of cookies. Sugar is wonderful. It's my second favorite white powder. Eggs are delicious when cooked. Flour is useful, and so are a bunch of other things. Individually, they're good, but when you put them together and bake them right, you get cookies, a new, original great thing made from standard ingredients. Take the school itself for instance. Schools like Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters tend to be a place for superhero teams to form and for them to practice their abilities. While there's some of that here, Sky High itself is meant to serve as a microcosm for public schools, instead of being a team-up zone. Heroes fighting crime with a sidekick is another trope that we're used to by now, but the writers tossed out our expectations of this and instead used this trope as an allegory for students who are deemed by their schools as gifted and those who are average or even special. Kids who are more academically capable or really just better at test taking are showered with awards and special events and honors classes and scholarships, while the average ones who don't immediately stand out are pretty much assembly lined out of school. Their talents aren't grown, they aren't developed as members of our society. Schools will kiss the ground some kids walk on while ignoring others. Maybe I'm only speaking for America, or maybe viewers from other countries can relate, but in a nation of over 50 million students, there aren't enough resources to provide a solid education for every individual. Instead, most students are pushed through the motions of attending class, endless memorizing, and writing what they can remember on a test so that they can move on to the next grade. This cycle occurs until graduation, when you have to decide what to do with the rest of your life. These kinds of kids make up what Sky High would deem as the hero support. After graduation, the heroes are expected to take on the world, saving the day from giant robots, but the sidekicks will always be beneath them, helping on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's so weak, man. I'm already holding this crossbow. Why can't I just shoot him myself?
Because we're hero support. And if your hero asks for a crossbow, you hand it to him.
Or her.
Real-life equivalencies would be like the gifted students taking up law or medicine, while the rest are expected to take up service or a trade. But no one expected the garbage men to make more than the communications majors. I guess the sidekicks win after all. Even the powers themselves take the place of academic gifts and abilities. Some students are gifted in STEM fields, while others are better at painting or film or foreign language. Schools tend to value some abilities over others. When budget cuts roll around, you bet your Shrek collection it's not math that's getting scrapped. It's the same way at Sky High. Talents like super strength and acid spit are appreciated far more than melting or guinea pigging. I'm sure you can see the parallels to 2002's No Child Left Behind Act, which caused schools to teach to the test, pushing students to learn particular subjects to pass a test and not much else so that they can get grant money. In the end, it's not the so-called heroes who save the school, but the glossed over sidekicks. Their abilities prove far more useful than they were given credit for, showing that true heroes, or in the real world, a brilliant student can come from anywhere, not just a math class. We all have different abilities, and when utilized, each one can make a difference. Some of the most memorable characters in superhero films can be found in Sky High, but what can I say? Bruce Campbell always stands out. Coach Boomer gets plenty of comedic lines, and it's fitting that the guy called Boomer is the loud, obnoxious one.
He put his hands on me! You're done! Call 911 to touch him! Look at him! He's nuts! Here!
But I think I have to start with our main protagonist, Will Stronghold. Will is our typical fish out of water, who we the audience follow as he, a freshman, learns the ins and outs of Sky High. Through him, we get to see how superficial power placement is and how rigid the school's class system is. Will is also a very relatable protagonist who has very real flaws and conflicts that actual high schoolers go through. Sky High isn't like those Disney Channel original movies about teenagers trying to gain popularity, or extremely melodramatic Netflix originals that make you just wanna... No, what Will goes through is something you can see a freshman going through, well, aside from the superpower stuff. Immediately, we see Will pretending to develop super strength so he doesn't disappoint his parents. He's completely oblivious to the fact that his best friend has a major crush on him. Stronghold has to decide what friends to keep and who to toss, and instead of hitting up Panabaker like a sane person, he gets catfished by a 40-year-old. Like the superhero tropes, nothing is played for so long or so straightforward to the point that it becomes stale. Take the whole lying about his powers thing. Sky High could have easily fallen into the trap of being a liar movie, where a protagonist lies his way through the story only to get caught at the end of the second act, but redeem himself in the end. Instead, Will confesses to Snake Plissken pretty early on, and then gets super strength the next day. The story then progresses to Will getting acquainted with Gwen in hero classes. It moves on. I also have to appreciate how well the movie is able to balance Will being flawed and likable at the same time. Throughout Sky High, he gets played and used and makes mistakes, but he always tries to do the right thing, as oblivious as he may seem sometimes. So despite being a flawed teenager, you can tell he has a good heart. This scene right here says it all.
It's not Coach Boomer. It's me, okay? I don't have any powers. But I don't care. Because really, the fact of the matter is, I'm proud to be a sidekick.
Dang, for a cheesy 2000s superhero movie, the acting is really good. Layla is Will's lifelong friend who serves as the voice of reason throughout the movie. Her role is to be the Ian Malcolm of Sky High, to criticize the flawed system and why certain actions are potentially harmful. A good example of this would be the power placement scene, where she criticizes Coach Boomer for basically determining a student's worth by how well they perform on an arbitrary and biased test.
But to participate in this test would be to support a flawed system. I think the whole hero-sidekick dichotomy only serves to...
Despite being one of the most overpowered characters in the entire movie, who could have easily made the hero track, Layla shoved in with the sidekicks for refusing to participate.
I believe in only using my powers when the situation demands it.
Well, you're in luck. This is the situation, and I'm demanding it.
Even when it's against her own interests, Layla sticks by her morals, so we know she ain't a sellout. As a small side note, I'm so glad Sky High came out in 2005 before all the social justice warrior crap took off during the Obama administration. Watching it in 2020, it's tempting to think of the vegans who go around lecturing everyone, or the BLM extremists who want to tear down the entire government because they see everything as unfair or racist. But we have to remember that this was a far simpler time. The biggest division back then was PS2 versus GameCube, to which, unpopular opinion, the original Xbox was best. Once that disconnect is made, you totally understand Layla and the point she's trying to make.
You're proving that we're not heroes and sidekicks. We're just people.
Super people.
War and Peace, aside from his great name, is also excellent. This guy was the original Zuko, an aggressive, fire-throwing villain turned hero with long, dark hair. The only thing he's missing is... honor! Peace begins the film despising Will because the commander put his father in prison. But yet again, Sky High chooses to not go too far with this overused sins of the father trope. Instead, Warren grows closer with the protagonist as the story progresses, and eventually teams up with the sidekicks to save Sky High. This character definitely grows the theme of legacy, that he and Will don't need to continue what their parents have done, but can be their own people instead and can find pride in who they are, not what's expected of them. Warren initially wants to incinerate Will as revenge for what happened to his father, but gives up this quest to fulfill his duty as his father's son in order to help Will and the school. I also love how Warren is that reality check character. He's not like Layla, who pushes the main message of the movie, but instead calls out Will and Layla on all their crap and questions what the heck is happening throughout the film. Man, I love this guy. Kurt Russell also deserves a big shout out for a wonderful comedic performance as Steve Stronghold, better known as the Commander. I'm not used to seeing him this goofy on screen, but he owns every scene he's in.
We promised Gwen we'd go to the dance. And when a stronghold makes a promise, son, that promise is kept.
Now, if you ignore some of the side characters, that leaves us with Royal Pain, who really is the adhesive that sticks this whole movie together. Actually, never mind, it's only a metaphor. She's probably the biggest player in the story and themes, in more ways than one. Originally named Sue Tenney, she graduated Sky High in the 80s alongside the Commander and Jetstream, but like plenty of kids attending, she was brushed to the side as hero support, labeled a social outcast, and pushed through high school without being able to reach her full potential. Her power was being a technopath, which nobody found useful back then, but in the 2000s, yeah, that's hero material. What I very much appreciate about the villain is how her motivation isn't power or money or any of that generic stuff. No, Gwen was a victim of an unfair system, just like many of our protagonists. But instead of trying to reform the education system or make the most of a bad situation, Gwen's goal is to completely overthrow Sky High. That's what the pacifier is for. Man, 2005 was a heck of a year. No, this pacifier that turns its targets into babies. Royal Pain shoots up the homecoming dance with it, turning all the students and teachers into babies so that she and her friends can raise them to be supervillains, putting herself on top so her genius can finally be given the appreciation it deserves. At first glance, she may seem like a cheesy villain, turning everyone into babies. But then you realize that Gwen, or Sue, was actually a victim of the very system Sky High critiques. The high school failed her, but the solution she came up with, however, was too extreme. Royal Pain is the 2020 Layla. Sue turned to villainy as the only true way to show off one's capabilities when using them for good is just as good, if not better. The bitterness and resentment left her too narrow-minded to realize this. She could have used her gifts to become the next Steve Jobs, but instead chose to express them through crime. Royal Pain is the perfect antagonist for this movie as she suits the themes and conflicts so well.
What if I said it's not just her twin, it's her evil twin?
This Friday, you say?
Methulah, you dog.
I cannot stress enough how Sky High has some of the most cleverly written humor I've ever seen in cinema. It feels like the writers wrote a great script, but then thought, what if we snuck in a killer joke between every other line? That's what the end product is. This Disney film is full of amazing one-liners and witty social commentary. Even when the film first opens, we get this great exchange between Steve and Will.
Oh, hey Dad, just trying to get a few sets in before school.
Low weights, high rep, huh? Good thinking. Don't want to bulk up.
Will racks on all these weights to his barbell, pretending to have super strength, but his dad, being as overpowered as he is, looks at that and thinks Will's using light weights to gain definition instead of bulking. From the moment you hit the play button, Sky High is ready to throw you some S-tier comedy. And what about later in the film, when Will and Warren have to play this absurd game called Save the Citizen? The school literally has two villains and two heroes fighting in order to save a dummy from getting shredded by razors, when our unworthy ears are gifted with this gem right here.
Remember when we used to use real citizens? Yes.
Oh my gosh, they hung real people over their spiky death with two untrained teenagers as their only hope. Not to mention that Steve points out how his son was the first freshman hero to win. Imagine how many civilians were mutilated in front of an entire high school crowd. Where the heck do I sign up? As a superhero comedy, this work of artistic perfection contains so many winks and nods to past icons of the genre.
The kids who get bit by radioactive insects or fall into a vat of toxic waste, their powers usually show up the next day.
It's also willing to poke fun at some recognizable superhero elements, like when Mr. Boy is teaching his hero support class and has "Holy blank blank man" written on the board. He's teaching the sidekicks to talk like 60s Robin, and it's fantastic. By 2005, the superhero craze had already been well established in Hollywood, and there already had been decades and decades of the stuff. So it's great seeing this movie be not only self-aware, but fully embracing the goofiness of it all. Sky High doesn't need all this over-the-top, unfunny bathos that the MCU keeps waterboarding me with. It was a time when not everything had to feel like Iron Man. Nah, it had its own brand of clever quips and zingers. The social commentary, too, feels especially unique to Sky High, getting laughs while still contributing to the themes of the movie.
Wow, all I can do is punch stuff.
Yet he'll be the one on cereal boxes. Show me the justice in that.
Mr. Medulla delivers a witty line that points out how athletes generally receive more fame and attention than scientists who have far more important jobs. Not only is it relevant to our real world that athletes get all the attention, but the movie too, since Gwen's lack of appreciation for her talent is what drove her to villainy. There are so many lines that hit home. It's crazy how much thought went into this script for a Disney superhero high school kids movie. What more is there to say about Disney's amazing response to the comic movie boom of the 2000s? Sky High is unironically one of the best superhero movies of the 2000s, and that's truly saying something. It shaped the screen with other hard-hitting contemporaries like Spider-Man 2, The Incredibles, and Batman Begins. Although Sky High didn't rake in as much cash as these other classics, it still deserves the same amount of recognition and praise for its relatable characters, fun action scenes, and unique brand of comedy. All this is topped off by a well-executed message about our public education system, and how it suppresses creativity and individuality by celebrating some students over others. Some are worshipped, while others feel abandoned by the system. Perhaps the key ingredient to why Sky High is so excellent is how well it utilizes superhero and high school tropes to further develop its themes and ideas. This is a movie that succeeds on every level, yet doesn't get enough credit for it. It's the most underappreciated classic of our time. People rarely ever talk about it or ever have it in mind when discussing the greats of the genre. And that's a real shame, because the achievements Disney reached here are sky high. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and check out my social media for channel updates. See you next time.